Hello, my lovely rose garden, and welcome to a retrospective I honestly never thought I would make and is seriously overdue. My name is Avalon Roselin, indie author, and your dragon enthusiast this evening. Wings of Fire, written by Tui Sutherland, has definitely had an impact on me, to say the least. It was largely through reviewing these books that I formed one of my most treasured friendships with TennelleFlowers and the rest of CarlottaStudios. Our shared reviews of the series drew in an unknowable number of viewers to my previous channel, and I was absolutely obsessed with Wings of Fire for several years, eagerly awaiting each new book and speculating on what might happen next. I've been meaning to make this review for a while now. At first I was hesitant to touch the series again, given why I privated my previous reviews, and then I kept putting it off, wanting to put it with some grand drawing as per Tennelle's own Rewriting the Power of 3 video. Finally, I decided to just talk and get this video out there rather than sitting on it for another year waiting for the visuals to be perfect. So, here it is. For a time, Wings of Fire was untouchable in my eyes. Sure, there were a few things here and there that I took issue with, but on the whole, I considered Wings of Fire to be one of the greatest middle-grade fantasy series ever written, second only to my all-time favorite series, Percy Jackson and the Olympians. And yet, by the end of the series, I found that I had very little difficulty donating almost my entire collection to my local library. I had gotten my enjoyment out of the books, and it was time to pass them on to aid the library that couldn't keep them on the shelves. I know, because whenever I checked out the newest book, there was a hold list, sometimes up to 40 or 50 readers long. So if I loved these books so much, how could I get rid of them so easily? There are books on my shelves that I've owned and read dozens of times since childhood. Why not Wings of Fire? If you're a Wings of Fire fan that is starting to get the feeling that I'm going to rip apart your favorite books, don't worry. This video isn't going to be a Wings of Fire was always terrible, actually. I can't believe I ever liked these books kind of video. I do still think that these books are pretty good quality and have a lot to provide for middle grade readers. But now that I can remove my rose-tinted glasses and utter obsession with anything to do with dragons, at least for a moment, I can more thoroughly examine where I think these books failed to live up to their fullest potential. I'll discuss what I thought was really good and what I thought needed more work, and maybe that will help other writers figure out where they should give their drafts another look during editing. And mostly, provide me with some closure on a topic that was once a fairly prevalent part of my online presence. First, I just want to briefly clear up why those old review videos were taken down, and why I ultimately made the decision to move channels, since years later, people are still asking. While one part of it that I would rather not go into detail on was a certain level of harassment, the main reason was I didn't want to be known for producing fandom content. I was producing both Wings of Fire and Warriors content primarily because it got views, not because I was especially passionate about either series after a point. And once I hit that threshold, interacting with the content and the fandoms became stressful and discouraging. I am a writer. My channel is for writing, including and especially my own. I wanted to be making content about other things, but I was discouraged from doing so because, although I had thousands of subscribers, they were only going to watch one of 2 types of video and ignore the rest. It made me feel like my original content was unimportant and would never be considered as good as these series that I loved and took inspiration from. And this is, by the way, a totally normal thing. Most people, most of the time, are looking for content they're already familiar with to talk about on social media, not looking for new original media. Anyone with an original work at all can tell you that this is true across the board when it comes to writing, art, animation, what have you. Marketing an original work is hard, and fandom content almost always does way better in terms of views, likes, and shares. It's not like the audience is to blame in any way. They're showing up for the content they're interested in, which is totally normal. But because my old channel's following was mostly made up of people there for fandom-specific content, which I was no longer interested in creating, I made a new channel, this one, to distance myself from that content. And I decided to private most of that content because I no longer wished to be associated with it. It made me feel bad, and if it stayed public, I know I'd still be tempted to go back to those videos and check comments and respond. I made the decision that was best for my mental health, and I don't regret it. So rest assured, Tennelle and I did not have some kind of falling out that dissolved our friendship. He is still very dear to me, and I hope our friendship will continue to the grave and beyond. Years later, now that the series is done, I think, I'm ready to revisit it and review Wings of Fire as a complete work rather than going through it one book at a time in chronological order. Instead of talking about each book one by one, I will instead alternate through my personal pros and cons until I run out of things to talk about. Because who on the internet doesn't love a list? It has been a while since I read the last book in the series, and longer since I read the earlier books. As of right now, the only book in the series that I still own is Legends Darkstalker. Suffice to say, I might get a few details wrong, which I'm sure I will hear all about in the comments, but my main points should still stand regardless, as they apply to the whole series rather than specific moments. Before we dive in, this is your general spoiler warning for the entire series. I'm going to be talking about things that appear in various books and the series as a whole, so assume there will be spoilers for all the books, even as I try to keep my points fairly broad. If you are leaving the video now, please remember to leave a like and subscribe for more content like this. I make videos about the books I read and the books I write, and your support really makes a difference for an indie author like me. If you're interested in supporting me even further, please consider buying my books or becoming a patron. You can find the links to my website, Patreon, Ko-fi, and social media accounts in the description. With that out of the way, let's start with the positive, then negative, then positive, and so on. Positive number 1, the characters. I am a character-driven reader, and to a slightly lesser extent, a character-driven writer. I am of the opinion that a good character can carry a bad plot better than a good plot can carry a boring character. And as far as I'm concerned, Sutherland absolutely delivers on good, memorable characters throughout the Wings of Fire series. And that's saying a lot given how many characters there are in the series. Just from the main books, you're dealing with 15 different points of view that are all very distinct from each other. Then factor in the winglets and special editions, and that's easily over 20 unique perspective characters, each with their own casts of supporting characters, some of which only appear for that one book, but still stand out as either memorable secondary villains or allies to the leads. Many of the characters that I think of first when it comes to these books don't even have point of views, but still stand out from the rest of the cast only through the action and dialogue that the reader sees. That is an impressive accomplishment. When I start thinking of characters who don't have perspective books that I would love to see explored further in Winglets, the list is easily over a dozen characters long. Kinkajou, Kestrel, Riptide, Willow, Sora, Umber, Ruby, Icicle, Hailstorm/Pyrite, Anemone, Tamarin, Orchid, Mastermind, Marosir, the False Dragonette, Scarlet, and that's just the ones I can name off the top of my head. So for a character-driven reader like myself, Wings of Fire is an incredible series, especially when compared to one of its major crossover fandoms, Warriors, which was at the time, and probably still is, critiqued for having a large cast of characters that feel very empty and undeveloped. If you were a Warriors fan at the time that Wings of Fire came out, like I was, then the stark contrast in the amount of unique character voices and the level of care put into almost every character's backstory and motives and personality was a huge point in Wings of Fire's favor, and still is. That said, negative number 1, the world building. the same level of care was not consistently put into the world that the characters inhabit. And I say consistently because there are times that some very interesting lore is introduced, like the varying structures of the different dragon tribes. I thought that the first few books actually did a really good job defining each dragon tribe and showing the reader a little bit about their way of life and how they differ from each other. But as the series went on, this kind of fell off a bit, or at least it wasn't explored to its fullest potential. Some of the things that I liked with the world building was stuff like the Mudwings living in sibling groups, and that being the most important family dynamic to them, while parents are basically absent. And other non-standard family groups like the Mud and Rain Kingdoms existing alongside matrilineal hierarchies where dragons' bloodlines are very closely traced, like in the Ice and Sea Kingdoms. But then there was stuff that was severely underutilized, like the cities where dragons from different tribes live together. How did that work during the war? How does Mudwing succession work? Why are the tribes fundamentally the same 2,000 years after Darkstalker was put into hibernation? What holidays or celebrations exist in this world? We know that Darkstalker and Clearsight are legendary figures. Are there others in other tribes, and if so, who are they? How did Clearsight manage to fuck so hard that she made an entire species of dragon divergently evolve into 2 new tribes if we are actually to believe that happened for real and isn't a metaphor or a piece of propaganda? And while we're on the subject of propaganda, why is it that after the War of Sandwing Succession, the dragon tribes are more or less okay with each other, except for a few long-standing grudges between individuals and the Night-Ice conflict that is reignited by Darkstalker? How is Jade Mountain Academy able to exist that fast, and why isn't more time spent on it in the books? While I was glad to see that the previous protagonist group was more or less able to pass on the torch smoothly to the next batch of POV characters without overstaying their welcome, Jade Mountain Academy itself ended up feeling underdeveloped and superfluous to everything else that went on following its introduction. There's just a lot, and I mean a lot, of questions that I have about the details and specifics of this world that wouldn't have taken a large detour to explain. I believe that there is currently a guidebook on each of the tribes that helps flesh things out a little bit more, but I feel like this is stuff that could and should have been covered in the series proper. But that ties into a larger negative, so I'll leave off here and go to positive number 2, the writing. The way the books are written is itself engaging, especially in later books where the tones seem to have shifted to accommodate younger readers and incorporate more comedy. While the books were definitely never written for an adult audience, they did get less overtly violent, at least from what I remember, and focused more on the character voices that I praised earlier. These books are fun to read, plain and simple. The characters banter back and forth and have believable relationships with each other. They're allowed to get on each other's nerves, but still be friends. They have different ways of coping with their troubles, different ideas and views, and all of this contributes to making engaging character narratives to read. I will never forget the excessive use of shouty capitals in Peril's book, or how Sutherland writes child characters who will say the damnedest things, such iconic lines as, "I want to see mommy kill grandma." But with that, there are also moments and scenes that can be genuinely disturbing. The Poison Jungle stands out as a prime example of just how successful Sutherland could be if she decided to pursue children's horror. And these moments do not clash with the comedy or camaraderie, but stand as the reason why those things are so important for the characters. It's a beautifully struck balance. Even in the worst of my reading slump, I could finish a Wings of Fire book in a single day. Most of the time I did, because I simply couldn't put them down, even when I had issues with certain developments. Or rather, negative number 2, dropped development, aka the formula. One of the best parts of the series also ends up being one of its weak points for me. When reading a character's perspective, they are so full and complete and rounded, but then in the next book, a new character takes over, and the reader is treated only to their view of the previous perspective characters. I think the most egregious example is with Clay, who, in the first book, goes through a whole arc about his place in the prophecy and whether or not he is a violent monster like his caretakers believe him to be, only for the rest of the series to pretty much reduce him to big guy likes to eat jokes. In the book, Clay finds out he was a bigwings, the first of a clutch of mudwings to hatch, who was then the leader of the sibling group and their protector, and he comes to view himself as the Dragonettes of Destiny's bigwings, but then never takes on a leadership role in the group or gives a rousing, morale-boosting speech ever again. After his perspective book, all the development and complexity that the reader got to see are essentially reset, because the other characters aren't aware of all that, and Clay does not continue to show a changed outlook. I think Blue is also another pretty bad example of this happening, but it happens to a lot of characters to an extent. Peril is basically irrelevant after her perspective book. Kinkajou never gets a perspective, despite her playing a key supporting role in 2 arcs and defeating Darkstalker. Characters returning from previous arcs are essentially represented as their niche character roles, such as Starflight being a generic nerd, and Tsunami being a ready-to-leap into battle at a moment's notice kind of action girl. Not even becoming queen of 2 tribes seems to have affected Glory very much. While I don't need these characters' entire personalities to change, years in their new roles should definitely have some kind of impact on their behavior. I didn't want to make this its own separate negative, but this plays into a related issue I had, especially with the early books, which is the formulaic structure. The main character typically gets separated from the rest of the group, goes through some kind of arc while separated, and then rejoins the group that has no idea about anything they just learned about themselves. This was most notable in the early books, which is why, again, I didn't make it its own point, but the development in isolation contributes to the problems of the books rarely showing the impact of a character's arc after the fact. Also, a lot of the books have a strong theme of unity and teamwork and working alongside those who are different in a sort of anti-racism message. But then most of the major conflicts are solved by one character working on their own. Teamwork did not solve the War of Sandwing Succession. Sunny went on a solo mission. Teamwork did not defeat Darkstalker. Kinkajou transformed him into Peacemaker, committing an act that was seen as morally reprehensible throughout the rest of the arc by herself with no discussion about her plan with any of her friends. The Stealth Team did not defeat the Othermind. Luna talked Lizard/Freedom into telling her how to destroy it, and then did, again pretty much solving the problem on her own. Another formula that drops character development to focus on whichever perspective character is telling the story, rather than contribute to a cohesive plot structure. Again, this is going to get covered more in another negative on the list, so I'll leave it here and move on to positive number 3, representation. It cannot be understated that Wings of Fire probably has the most LGBT characters of any animal fiction series I've read, especially one that is this popular. And while it definitely took a long time for that to be shown on the page, I still think it is important that the readers see that Luna and Blue have 2 mothers, and that Sundew and Willow are girlfriends, and call each other that. I do wish that the series had then also confirmed Winter and or Keebly as bisexual, but I feel like the line about Keebly and Winter getting married, while a joke, does show that at least one of them would be down for that if they weren't both in love with Moon, and that same-sex marriages are common enough to not even warrant questioning from Keebly's mom. Anemone is also confirmed to have a crush on Tamarin, and Jambu and Pineapple, 2 male dragons, are in a relationship as well. Speaking of Tamarin, there are 2 blind characters in the series. Tamarin, who was born blind, and Starflight, who is blinded by an injury. One character is polydactyl, another is missing a leg and has damaged wings. While characters' mental disabilities can be difficult to determine without direct confirmation, I think it can be pretty soundly stated that Turtle has anxiety, Stonemover is suffering from depression, and Whiteout's confirmed synesthesia hints that she may also be autistic. And this is to say nothing of the absolute heaps of trauma and post-traumatic stress disorder that impacts characters throughout the series. All of these things work to impact the characters' individual voices and concerns, and it's just good to have a variety of representation in such a popular children's series. I'm sure there are valid concerns about how the representation itself is handled, but speaking as a disabled queer person, I would rather have the attempt offered by Wings of Fire than not. I'm going to add one more quick little positive before I get to the big negative. Positive number 4, the plot twists. There were several moments in the series where I legitimately did not expect what happened next, without it feeling like Sutherland pulled it out of her ass. There are some legitimately excellent twists in the series that elevate the story, like the Dragonet prophecy being faked by the Nightwings to give them time to decide on the Sandwing that will take the throne and negotiate while they take over the rainforest. That was an amazing twist that actually continued to have ramifications on the plot and characters, which is unfortunately a rare treat because of negative number 3, the dropped plot points. I saved this for last, minus a few bits of it here and there, because it is the biggest problem I have with the series and ties into everything quote-unquote wrong with these books. Wings of Fire is a series that has a ton of potential for interesting stories, and in many ways it does have interesting stories presented to the reader. But there are so many more that are just left behind and never touched again. This can happen when you have a lot of characters and a big world and not enough time to explore them thoroughly, but also if you know you aren't going to get to some of these things, why even bring them up? There are a ton of examples of this throughout the series, and I cannot even begin to discuss all of them in this video, but some of the ones that really bugged me were Sora and Umber disappearing from the series after Moonrising. Sora attempts to murder Icicle, whom she believes to have killed her sister in the war, and maybe she did. Sora's brother Umber takes her away from Jade Mountain Academy for her own safety and the safety of the other students following this incident. And then we never hear about them again. This does not bring up long-lasting questions about the issues of running Jade Mountain Academy and the fact that a lot of the students could have fought in the war, sometimes directly against each other. It's just a sort of twist ending to a murder mystery that only lasts for that one book, and then the leads have to go chase down Icicle for a completely unrelated plot. It didn't have to happen this way. Icicle was already supposed to be trying to kill the Dragonets of Destiny, so why not have the bomb be a failed assassination attempt? And why bring Sora into this if there was no plan to ever follow up on Clay's siblings, or really the Mudwings in general, ever again? How did Marsh react to this news? Why didn't Sora or Umber come back in the last book to represent the Mudwings? In fact, why are there 2 totally random characters in the final book's stealth team instead of any Mudwing or Rainwing the reader has actually seen before and cares about? Who cares about Bullfrog or Pineapple when you could have used Sora, Umber, Marsh, Clay, Reed, Pheasant, Tamarin, Jambu, Kinkajou, Mangrove, or Orchid? Even Coconut or Liana? If Sutherland wanted to show that Jambu and Pineapple were together, that would have worked just as well if Jambu was in the stealth team. Darkstalker comes back after a 2,000-year slumber, being now the only living dragon that most characters know about that remembers the Night Kingdom before they relocated to the volcanic island seen in the Dragonets of Destiny arc. Starflight, the nerd who loves learning all he can, especially about history, is nowhere to be seen. Has no questions to ask this ancient dragon who was literally there, no comments about the movement of the Nightwing tribe following his return, despite Starflight having a lot of conflicting feelings over his tribe and shame in their actions during the war. Just no commentary at all from a fairly popular character who you would think would definitely have some thoughts about this that he would probably want to discuss with fellow Nightwing Moonwatcher to maybe offer a different perspective from the one that she is getting from Darkstalker. Honestly, there's just a lot missing with the 2,000-year-old dragon suddenly appearing in the modern day. A lot happens and changes in 2,000 years. I know that this isn't the point, and it would probably be a pretty wide detour to the story, but damn do I wish it was better acknowledged, or that the tribes in Darkstalker's book were noticeably different from the main series books. Disclaimer, this could be my history degree talking through me, but seriously, just stop and consider for a moment that we are currently in the year 2024. Think about all of the modern conveniences we have, how our society functions, what morals are generally seen as positive, and which vices are generally seen as negative, and then compare that to someone living in the year 24. It's a pretty big jump. The Rainwing-Nightwing merger presents so many rich opportunities for development and conflicts, especially as there is a push in the Jade Mountain arc for dragons of different tribes to start working together. This is kind of touched on when Darkstalker returns, but we really don't see enough of the interactions between the two tribes before that to really get a sense of if Darkstalker is actively changing anyone's minds about anything organically. Also, at the end of the arc, I guess the Nightwings just go back to being part of the Rain Kingdom, even though Foeslayer has returned, has all the same knowledge of the former Night Kingdom that Darkstalker did, and, as a female, could become the new queen of the Nightwings in order to help restore order to their tribe and lead them into a more cooperative future with the other tribes, but nope, back to the rainforest they go, I guess. Are Nightwings even allowed to, challenge Glory for the throne? Or will they forever be ruled by Rainwings? Which might be a fitting punishment for the war crimes they committed. I'm not necessarily against it, but it's still a question that's left hanging in the air with no clear answer. And I'm going to say it again. How the fuck did Clearsight have so many children that she caused an entire species of dragon to divergently evolve into two separate tribes? I kept waiting for this to be revealed to be Hivewing propaganda, which would have been very much in line with how they were presented. But no, apparently, we are meant to believe all Hivewings and Silkwings are descended from Clearsight's children, and Nightwing genes are just so powerful that they created two different types of dragons. What? Pretty much anything that was happening in the Lost Continent arc before the ending of the Poison Jungle was dropped. Now, don't get me wrong, I loved the cosmic horror elements with the Othermind, until the last book's resolution to that plot, but it does render pretty much everything that happened in the Lost Continent and the Hive Queen kind of irrelevant and never meaningfully goes back to the Chrysalis and the Silkwing Revolution, which was already underdeveloped. Instead, we get a side quest about the new Icewing Queen that frankly should have been a winglet, and then Luna pretty much solving the conflict by herself, a la Formula. Peril and Sky never meet, partially because Peril is completely absent from the Lost Continent arc. While one could argue that these dropped plot threads leave plenty of room for fan speculation and fan fiction, and sometimes that can be a good thing, there are way too many plots introduced and never followed up on in the series for the ending to feel truly satisfying. While some of this could be due to, supposedly, Sutherland not knowing that the series was continuing past each arc until late into development, not all of it is covered by that reasoning. The series does have some continuity nods, but not where it matters, and not nearly enough to make these disparate elements come together, leaving the series feeling a bit scattered. My final thoughts on Wings of Fire as a whole are this. If you are invested in characters, character arcs, dynamics, relationships, how to write unique character voices, Wings of Fire is one of the best series on the market today. I still stand by my opinion that Legends Darkstalker should legitimately be taught in creative writing classes for these things. If you want cohesive plots and consistent morals that challenge the characters past each individual book, the series is at its highest point in the first 5 books and then steadily declines in this regard to the point of mediocrity. I don't think that Wings of Fire ever reaches a point of being bad, but the formulaic elements and dropped plot threads and character developments from one book to the next can definitely become frustrating and work against the series being a truly great work of literature. I wish that I could give the series a stronger recommendation or say that the character work is good enough to overcome the issues, but the more you poke and pick at them, the more they unravel. Wings of Fire is ultimately pretty good. It's not amazing, incredible, or mind-blowing as I once thought it was, but it is good. Now, this was a series that I was obsessed with, and because of that, I can't just leave the video here. No, I need to tell you how I'd rewrite it with the benefit of 2020 hindsight. And this is not to say that the current books are bad or that my way of writing them would be better for all readers. This is just some of what I would have liked to see and how I would have handled certain things as a writer myself. If you don't like any of it, you're free to make your own rewrite or continue to enjoy the books as they are. And if you've made it this far into the video, please do give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel for more book and writing related content. Just remember that I don't make fandom-specific stuff all that often, and will probably never talk about Wings of Fire again after this video. Thank you for your support. Starting off, I'm changing up the Dragonets of Destiny prophecy a little. Here's how the prophecy goes now. Though the war will rage for years and years, the Dragonets will come. Though the land is soaked in blood and tears, the Dragonets will come. Largest egg in mountain high will bring to you the wings of sky. For wings of earth search through the mud for an egg the color of dragon blood. Find the egg of deepest blue, wings of sea will come to you. The righteous wings of night, hidden from all within plain sight. And safe from rival queens, the wings of sand remain unseen. Of 3 queens who blister, blaze, and burn, should they listen, should they learn, bow to a fate that is greater and higher to obtain the power of Wings of Fire. 5 eggs to hatch on the brightest night, 5 dragons born to end the fight. To crown the queen and set wrongs right, the Dragonets will come. Basically, I nixed the 20 years to give the Nightwings a little more wiggle room with their timing and reworded it to sound a bit more hopeful. Expanded on the eggs bit because I never liked how the sea and night eggs were kind of crammed together, and adjusted the bit about the Sandwing princesses because, well, you'll see. Instead of a scavenger killing Queen Oasis, she is instead found dead with no clear cause of death, mostly because I personally don't like humans in my dragon books. Each of the Sandwing princesses claims that they were the one to kill her, but with no clear evidence nor official challenge, none of them can prove it, which kickstarts the war. Each potential queen has benefits and drawbacks. Byrne has military might at her side and is favored by the Sandwings, but has a tendency to start fights, even among her own allies. Blister is smart and has an alliance with the Sea Wings and Mudwings, but lacks battle experience. Blaze is savvy with money and has a prosperous alliance with the Ice Wings, but doesn't have strong convictions. The idea here is that if they worked together, they'd be a great triad of leaders, with Byrne heading the military, Blister handling diplomacy, and Blaze being treasurer, but they can't get over their own greed and pride long enough to figure that out. Also, instead of Byrne killing Vitter, and R.I.P., I am definitely saying that name wrong, Vitter would have gotten to the Sky Kingdom too late to save the Skywing egg from Scarlet's mass culling because she enjoys war and wants it to continue. Much of the Dragonet prophecy, the Lost Heir, the Hidden Kingdom, and the Dark Secret could remain more or less the same, with more nods to character development and each of the Queen's strengths and weaknesses, as the Dragonets legitimately do consider each of them for the throne in accordance with the prophecy. For some more specific changes, Byrne would arrive to the Sky Kingdom in the Dragonet prophecy on a mission to recruit the Skywings to her cause, and get in a fight with Scarlet over the fact that Scarlet wants to kill the Dragonets of Destiny, and Byrne needs them to become queen. After the events at the Skywing Arena, the Skywings would be actively hunting the Dragonets down for the rest of the arc due to the damage Glory did to Queen Scarlet, who is confirmed to still be alive. Since the Skywings in this version aren't allied with any Sandwing queen, it doesn't matter who they pick a fight with. When the Dragonets are able to meet Blister at the Summer Palace in the Sea Kingdom, she tries to ply them with favors and promises of how she'd be a good queen because she has 2 allies, and Starflight, under orders from Marosir, would agree. She actually seems like a strong candidate, but then the Skywings attack the palace and the Dragonets are forced to leave, heading for the Rain Kingdom as they are still on a quest to meet their parents as well, and the Skywings are unlikely to expect them to be there, since Blaze is in the Ice Kingdom, and they would expect the Dragonets to go there next. The Hidden Kingdom and the Dark Secret would play out pretty much the same as they do in canon, with the Nightwings choosing to go with Blister because she has allies close to the rainforest and could help them cement their takeover. Most changes at this point would be acknowledgments of character development, Clay taking lead once or twice, or protecting the other Dragonets from the Skywing's flame breath, and maybe keeping an eye out for peril among them. Tsunami starting to do something reckless, and then pausing to consider her actions. Tsunami and Glory commiserating over the pressures of being royalty and what it means to be a good queen. Starflight and Glory having a conversation about the Rain Night Kingdom, and Starflight confirming that he will always, always be on Glory's side. Then comes the Brightest Night. This is the one that would need the most retooling because I have removed the humans, and also because I thought it was kind of a weak ending thematically. Sunny is still kidnapped by Fierce Teeth, Prey Hunter, and Strongwings, and is rescued by the Outclaws, who, upon realizing she's the Sandwing Dragonet of Destiny, because Sunny believes in the basic goodness of dragons above all and would choose to trust them with that information, introduce her to her mother, Thorn. Sunny explains that she needs to reunite with her friends to complete the prophecy. While waiting for her friends to join her at the Scorpion Den, Sunny learns more about the Sandwings. Thorn, despite being leader of the Outclaws, has an in at the Sandwing Palace, Prince Smolder, who is not eligible for the throne and therefore considered of little importance to his sisters. Sunny gets some valuable information about the Sand Kingdom throne, including the Eye of Onyx, which can only be used by the Queen. Sunny then gets the idea to have all the sisters come together with the Dragonets of Destinies to settle this once and for all. When her friends arrive and she tells them her plan, they're skeptical after all they've experienced, but agree to try things her way. Sunny, having spent time in the Sand Kingdom and realizing that the sisters need to work together, since the prophecy says 3 queens, asks Smolder to divide the Eye of Onyx into 3 pieces and give 1 piece to each sister. However, the Sandwing sisters don't accept this and begin to fight over who should be in charge. The 3 end up killing each other, leaving the Dragonettes confused over who should be the next queen now that Oasis's potential heirs are all dead. Will the Sandwings have no queen? It is then that Smolder reveals that he and Thorn have been in a relationship for years, and that, as a child of Oasis, his child is in the line of succession, meaning Sunny is the rightful queen, thus fulfilling the prophecy, since the Sandwing egg is specifically mentioned to be, quote, safe from rival queens. However, Sunny does not want to be queen, and abdicates the throne to Thorn. This is confirmed when the Dragonettes crown Thorn as queen, and the Eye of Onyx grants her the powers of the queen, aka the Wings of Fire. The prophecy never guaranteed Blister, Burn, or Blaze the Wings of Fire, only that it would be theirs if they listened, learned, and accepted a greater fate, which they didn't. Or at least Sunny claims as such, stating that the prophecy was real all along. Her friends may or may not believe her. This does remove Stone Mover from the equation, but I didn't really care about him that much, and I didn't love the tunnel magic things either. I think the story can be made to work without them. In the epilogue, Fate Speaker, having been exposed to the light of the 3 moons together after years of being hidden by the Nightwings with the other fake Dragonettes of Destiny, has a real vision. She foresees a terrible destruction coming upon the land unless the dragons unite at Jade Mountain. The Dragonettes begin making plans to address this. My main issues with the first 5 books are not really plot-related other than The Brightest Night, so that is where I put the most effort into this rewrite. From here on, things are going to change a lot more. First of all, it is 5 years from the end of The Brightest Night to the start of the second arc, and it starts with escaping peril. Because, let's wrap up that Scarlet subplot now, shall we? Peril has been on the outskirts of the Sky Kingdom all this time, doing things to sabotage Scarlet's attempts to assassinate the Dragonettes of Destiny and assisting the Skywing Resistance, led by Princess Ruby. Ruby, notably, does not trust Peril. Also, Kestrel is still alive and fighting in the Resistance. Her relationship with Peril is still very estranged. They go to the Rainwing Kingdom to get Glory's help, since Glory is the one that Scarlet wants dead the most, but Glory has to refuse since security in the Rain Knight Kingdom has to be her priority, and she's already dealing with assassination attempts, all of which have thankfully failed, but Deathbringer and Glory's Guard are on high alert. This is also the reader's first look at Moonwatcher. While there, Peril, who has to spend all her time in water, meets a Rainwing named Chameleon who claims to be her father and shows her his magical ability to change forms. He gives her the necklace that turns off her fire scales and makes her subservient to Scarlet again, and she abandons the Resistance, seemingly confirming Ruby's suspicions against her, especially when Chameleon, as Soar, uses her information to kidnap Cliff. Much of the rest of the book happens as in canon, with Peril forgetting Clay, Ruby challenging Scarlet, being revealed to be Tourmaline, etc. This sets up identity as a major theme of this set of books and puts the reader on guard because not everyone might be who they say they are. Chameleon has more forms that he has not revealed. Peril, now herself again, decides that she is at last ready to join Clay and his friends as, quote, one of the good guys, with Queen Ruby's blessing, and warns Glory about Chameleon. This book is mostly meant to bridge the gap between the Dragonets of Destiny arc and the Jade Mountain arc, wrapping up the Scarlet plot and showing a few familiar faces before we get to the new characters. Also, sorry to my fellow Darkstalker fans, but Chameleon is the main villain in this arc. He is an animus dragon who has the ability to change his form. I'm also editing the way animus magic works in this a bit. Instead of being able to do literally anything, animus dragons have specific abilities that they can hone. Anemone can enchant inanimate objects, which follows with what we see other Seawing animus dragons do in Legends Darkstalker. Fathom and Albatross move objects and build the palace by manipulating them with magic. Icewing animus dragons supposedly have a finite amount of magic, meaning they can only use it on a large-scale enchantment once, and they use it to make a gift for the tribe. Sandwing animus dragons can create things, like the Eye of Onyx, or Jerboa creating her own clone daughter. With Rainwing animus magic, Chameleon can completely transform himself into another dragon, including that dragon's natural abilities, and can enchant objects to transform others as well, like transforming Peril into a version of herself without fire scales and with loyalty to Scarlet. This is why Scarlet giving him treasure actually works as a bribe, instead of him just making treasure for himself. Now the Jade Mountain Academy arc really and truly begins. With the threat of Scarlet finally neutralized without causing an international incident, the Dragonets of Destiny are at last able to open Jade Mountain Academy. They have spent the last 5 years investigating the mountain, making sure it's stable, and preparing the school in coordination with Queen Thorn, Queen Ruby, Queen Moorhen, Queen Coral, Queen Glory, and Queen Glacier. The school's express purpose is in promoting tribe relations in order to prevent the calamity foreseen by Fatespeaker. This is now Moon Rising. Moonwatcher joins the left wing, which consists of Winter, Keebly, Turtle, Kinkajou, Sepia, and Pyrite. At the urging of her mother Secret Keeper, Moonwatcher does not reveal her telepathy to the others, though she wonders if Fatespeaker already knows. Keebly, Winter, and Kinkajou are the oldest members of the wing, having been young dragonets in the first arc. Turtle, Sepia, and Moonwatcher were born afterwards. And Pyrite, well, Pyrite is Pyrite, except she's not. And yes, this means that Turtle and Anemone are not siblings. Let me cook. We're starting with only 2 wings this time around, since this is the first year the school is open. The right wing consists of Fearless, Icicle, Ostrich, Anemone, Tamarin, Newt, and Peregrine. Tamarin, Anemone, Ostrich, Icicle, and Peregrine are the oldest members of this wing, having been young dragonets in the first arc, while Newt and Fearless were born after the first arc. Moonwatcher, with telepathy powers, is able to pick out that there are some not quite right things with this group of students. Winter and Icicle seem to be plotting and have a specific hatred of Nightwings. She can't read Turtle's mind at all, and Pyrite repeats the same thoughts in her head over and over again on loop. Someone makes an attempt on Starflight's life in the library, and is only stopped because Moonwatcher foresees the explosion a few minutes before it happens, revealing her powers to the revulsion of most of the other dragonets, and jealousy of Fearless, who has no powers. Still, Moonwatcher knows the culprit will strike again, and she tries to solve the mystery, but who can she trust? Her wing is who she can trust. Mostly. Because the culprit is Pyrite, working on loyalty to Queen Scarlet, even though she's dead, to kill the Dragonets of Destiny. When Pyrite is apprehended, Peril notices a familiar necklace that Pyrite never removes and singes it off, revealing that Pyrite was Hailstorm, the sibling that Icicle and Winter thought they lost in the war. After recovering those memories, Hailstorm, of sound mind and body, asks to be changed again. Hailstorm never liked living as a male dragon and hated Icewing society and how it pushed competition among everyone to fight for a place in the hierarchy. Hailstorm asks Anemone if she could possibly adjust the enchantment to not take away will or memories, since the necklace is still enchanted with the original magic. Anemone agrees to try, and it seems to work. Hailstorm becomes a female Skywing again, but this time with all of Hailstorm's memories and thoughts intact. She confirms that she feels more herself, and wants to continue attending Jade Mountain Academy if that's okay with the others, since she has a lot to catch up on. She names herself Carnelian. Come winter turning, Winter is not sure how to feel about having his sibling back as Carnelian. Hailstorm had been placed on a pedestal for his and Icicle's entire lives, as had Icewing Society. How could Carnelian possibly choose to turn her back on all that and live as a completely different dragon in a completely different tribe? A lot of Winter Turning was about the internal struggle of Winter coming to grips with the fact that the Ice Kingdom is not all it's cracked up to be, and had some serious issues, and that stays the same. When Icicle leaves Jade Mountain Academy to tell their parents about Carnelian, Winter decides to go after her, as do Carnelian and the rest of the Left Wing. During the journey, Sepia, being a Mudwing, would especially sympathize with Carnelian. She could never imagine not supporting her siblings, and even though they haven't been away long, she misses Newt already. Winter's parents are not supportive of Carnelian, and demand that their son be returned or else they will go to Queen Glacier to revoke support for Jade Mountain Academy and drop Winter to the lowest rung of the Icewing social ladder, effectively banishing him. He has to choose between supporting Carnelian and his friends or his place in Icewing society. After journeying with these other dragons on the way to the Ice Kingdom and getting to know Carnelian better as a real dragon and not a legend to live up to, he decides that if the Ice Kingdom has no room for Carnelian, it has no room for him either. Icicle stays behind, opening a spot at the Academy for Lynx. However, before they leave the Ice Kingdom, Moonwatcher says she can hear someone calling for help. Someone who was trapped in the Diamond Caves very long ago, and she can't ignore their pleas for help. Winter and Carnelian react strongly when she says who it is. Foe Slayer. Insert Legends Darkstalker here, with basically no changes, honestly, aside from Darkstalker never being able to wake from his slumber and a lot of information about him being buried. And this is why Turtle is not Anemone's brother. At the end of Legends Darkstalker, Fathom and Indigo are implied to have had their family far away from the Seawing royal family, meaning that if we are to believe that Turtle is Fathom's direct descendant, he would not be in the current royal family's direct lineage, but a distant cousin or something. Just go with it. Yes, this also means that Anemone is a natural-born animus. I didn't hate the twist that Turtle had given Anemone her powers in the books, but I also didn't really see the significance of it, aside from revealing that Darkstalker is, shock of shocks, lying about his ability to do so. It just didn't leave enough of an impact on me to be worth keeping. Also, the Diamond Trial is not a thing. Foe Slayer was frozen in the Diamond Caves, magically conscious to witness her kingdom's destruction, and is not aware it's been thousands of years since she lost track of the days, when we pick up with Talons of Power from Kinkaju's perspective. With Foe Slayer in tow, the Wing returns to Jade Mountain Academy to introduce her to the Dragonets of Destiny and set up a meeting with Glory. Starflight delights in the chance to learn more about the Night Kingdom history before they abandoned their previous home. Foe Slayer leads the Nightwings back to the hidden site of their old kingdom, explaining why they left. Because of Darkstalker. While Moonwatcher is excited to go, Kinkajou worries that it means her friend will leave the academy, and she's still parsing through her feelings about Nightwings and her experience on the volcanic island. However, just as things are starting to get settled between Glory and Foeslayer about where and how the Nightwings will live, Chameleon, as Darkstalker, arrives. He had been disguised among the Nightwings that left the rainforest, and now sees his opportunity to take power, since he can turn himself into any dragon with that dragon's capabilities. Why not the ultra-powerful Darkstalker, able to read minds, see the future, and perform feats of lost Nightwing animus magic? Nightwing animus magic, as it turns out, involves casting enchantments directly on oneself or others, and this would be basically the only minor edit to Legends. Chameleon as Darkstalker begins to do a lot of the same enchantments Darkstalker did in the canon, making everyone like and trust him, making himself invulnerable to attack, etc. Turtle acts quickly to enchant an object to make himself and Kinkajou immune and undetectable to Chameleon Stalker, revealing that he too is an animus. Kinkajou wonders how many animus dragons Seawing have, and they plot how to unbrainwash everyone and defeat Chameleon. This takes us into Darkness of Dragons with Turtle as the main point of view. Turtle grew up his whole life with stories of how animus magic corrupts the soul and makes you evil, and always feared his own magic as a result. This book is mostly about him understanding that it isn't the magic that makes a dragon evil, but how they abuse their power. Again, the theme of this arc is identity, so expect a lot of internal monologuing about how Turtle views himself and what his animus magic means to him. I do love Turtle's bookish personality, and would definitely have him use that as a metaphor or analogy, maybe viewing his magic as some kind of dragon version of Mr. Hyde. Chameleon Stalker, determined to rule over all of Pyria, relocates to Jade Mountain to spread his influence. Unknown to him, Turtle and Kinkajou follow. Working together with Kinkajou, Turtle finds a way to mass-produce items that will make dragons immune to animus spells, freeing first their friends at the Academy, then the Queens and the Dragonets of Destiny. The magic duel between Turtle and Anemone still happens, with Anemone acting under Chameleon Stalker's influence until Turtle is able to defeat her, and Kinkajou defeats Chameleon Stalker by throwing one of the anti-enchantments into his open mouth while he's monologuing. Chameleon Stalker is forced to turn back into Chameleon, no longer able to use his powers. With Chameleon defeated, Turtle has the opportunity to erase his own powers as well, but he has learned that being an animus dragon is part of who he is, and he's ready to accept that part of himself. Just as Moonwatcher feared being shunned for her mind reading, Turtle had feared being shunned for his animus powers, and Carnelian for being who she really is. But all three find acceptance in their identities and return to Jade Mountain, excited for what will come next, especially with Queen Foeslayer now restoring the Night Kingdom with Queen Glory and Queen Glacier's help, as Glacier wants to help mend the rift Diamond caused in their kingdom so many years ago that might have avoided so much hardship. Glacier seems to have been a pretty reasonable queen for as much as we see of her, so I think that fits. Not everything in this arc needed to change, but I definitely felt like a lot of the earlier plots didn't connect with the later plots or provide consistent themes across the whole arc. So I tried to do more to address that by having Chameleon be the villain throughout and have his actions specifically drive the theme of identity. I also personally like to headcanon Hailstorm as trans and adjusted the narrative a bit to be more affirming of that. It might not be perfect, but I would have loved to see a trans character in this series. I'm only covering broad stroke plot points in this, so you'd have to imagine all the banter the right and left wings would get up to. I know I removed a major storyline for Keebly and Winter, but they would still be annoying and teasing each other, I promise. Since there aren't humans in the world, maybe Winter just has a fascination with animals that live outside the Arctic region. He wants to open a zoo. Another character arc, or ongoing subplot I'd like to include, is the relationship between Moonwatcher and Fearless. The original 5 books focused on characters that had grown up with dragons from different tribes and largely isolated from their own heritage, Webs didn't even teach Tsunami Aquatic. We get to see how this impacts the Dragonets of Destiny in their approaches to the world around them. The Jade Mountain arc would do the reverse, taking characters that have primarily grown up among their own tribes and seeing how this impacts them when they interact with those outside their culture. Moonwatcher and Fearless would be a kind of through line for this, them both being Nightwings who were born and grew up together in the rainforest before going to Jade Mountain Academy. Fearless would have an attitude of being okay with dragons outside the Nightwing tribe, but always with an undercurrent of, but I support my tribe first no matter what, while Moonwatcher would slowly drift away from Fearless as she forms stronger bonds with the dragons in her wing. I like to imagine a big confrontation scene after Chameleon Stalker starts handing out superpowers to win over other dragons, as Darkstalker does in canon, with Fearless cheerfully informing Moonwatcher that she's a real Nightwing now, only to be able to read the shock and disgust in Moonwatcher's mind, and the two of them get in a fight over what having pride in being a Nightwing means. Winter and Icicle also support this idea, with a pair who were once close, drifting apart due to shifting ideals, but to a slightly lesser extent since Icicle leaves Jade Mountain because she refuses to give up their parents' belief in Icewing superiority. For the epilogue, years later, Queen Anemone would call on Jade Mountain to look into the legend of the Lost Continent, as a dragon with butterfly wings named Luna has just washed ashore. The Lost Continent arc would bring us a well and proper second generation of the Pyria characters, taking place after another time skip from the Jade Mountain arc, with a Pyria ruled in harmony by Queen Thorn, Queen Foeslayer, Queen Glory, Queen Sepia, Queen Snowfall, Queen Anemone, and Queen Ruby. Queens Coral, Moorhen, and Glacier having died, Glacier dying of natural causes, Coral staging the challenge when she knew she was soon to die to pass on the throne, and Moorhen in a traditional challenge. Our second generation characters in Pyria are Princess Firefly, daughter of Glory and Deathbringer, Princess Onyx, daughter of Smolder and Thorn and little sister to Sunny, Current, child of Tsunami and Riptide, Truthseeker, child of Fatespeaker and Starflight, and Lava, child of Clay and Peril. The Jade Mountain arc characters still live and work in the school. Carnelian, Moonwatcher, Winter, Kinkajou, Turtle, and Keebly are all beloved teachers and mentors to our second gens. Starflight is still around as the librarian, of course, and Clay is the headmaster with Sunny as deputy headmistress. But the Lost Continent is not just about the Pyria dragons. Pantala is involved too. Much of the Lost Continent, and honestly the Hive Queen, could play out similarly to how they do in canon. The main thing I would change about the Lost Continent is blue. I would really want to push for a we all need to work together to overthrow an unjust government kind of message here, so Blue's main character flaw to start the arc would be apathy. He doesn't see how he or the Chrysalis movement could ever make things better for the Silkwings, and is largely not too concerned about trying, despite Luna's insistence and eagerness to join the Chrysalis. He kind of bought into the propaganda that Queen Wasp runs things better than the Silkwings could run themselves, and is ordained by Clearsight to rule Pantala, but mostly he just doesn't see the point in fighting back. Also, a note on the world building, real quick. The Book of Clearsight and the idea that the Hivewings are Clearsight's direct descendants is pure propaganda here. Clearsight did have a few children with Sunstreak, but not enough to fundamentally change the genetic makeup of an entire species to cause them to split into two distinct tribes. Blue's mind begins to change when Luna is revealed to be a Flamesilk, and when he meets Cricket, while she's hiding the fact that she's not part of the Hive, revealing that there are Hivewings who aren't innately part of the Hive, and that the Hive is an objectively horrible thing that terrifies Cricket. This starts to shift Blue's way of thinking from, this is just how things are, to, this is how things have been made to be. He, Cricket, and Swordtail embark on an adventure to find Luna, and Blue gets to see firsthand that the Flamesilks are not happily producing their fiery threads in a safe environment as Queen Wasp claims. They are enslaved. This is the final breaking point for Blue to actually devote himself to take action against the hive and join the chrysalis. Unfortunately, due to her inexperience with flying, Luna is swept out to sea in a storm during the escape, tying into the epilogue of Darkness of Dragons. Blue and Swordtail bring Cricket to the chrysalis as she may be the key to defeating Queen Wasp in the hive. It is revealed at the end that the chrysalis is also working with the Poison Wings. I'm torn on whether or not the Poison Wings and the Sapwings should be distinctive types of dragons or not. I do kind of like the idea of having more types of dragons, and maybe Leafwing is a category that Queen Wasp uses to lump them together. Whether they have physical differences or not, they do have separate queens, so they are functionally different tribes and have been for generations. The Hive Queen could also largely be the same as in canon, with Cricket's point of view and her discovering the truth of the hive. Lady Scarab and Lady Jewel would also reveal themselves to be free from the hive and working with the chrysalis to bring Queen Wasp to justice, partially by working on a cure to the poison that Wasp injects. Cricket is a sign of hope for them, because this confirms that Wasp's poison does not have long-term hereditary effects as they once feared. One of the major conflicts in this book and this arc is in debate over how to go about the revolution. As in canon, the Poison Wings and Belladonna want to just kill all the Hive Wings in revenge for what was done to their homes and their tribe, whether the Hive Wings are all guilty or not be damned, because they have done nothing in the past 3 or 4 generations to right any of the wrongs, and are actively benefiting from the subjugation of Silkwings without a second thought. The chrysalis, while understanding entirely in their effort to liberate Silkwings, does not agree with killing the Hive Wings who are controlled by Wasp, and also know that attacking the hives would put Silkwing lives in danger too. I really liked the Hive Queen and the topics it covered, and I also liked Cricket as a perspective character and her unique family situation. I really don't see a lot of need for large-scale changes to this book. I would add an epilogue that shows one of the chrysalis members, maybe Io or Tau, being captured by the hive and then injected with Queen Wasp's venom, showing that she has developed to the point of being able to control other types of dragons as well, which is what she's been working on in secret for years. Now no one on Pantala is safe. The Poison Jungle picks up with Sundew's point of view, and the main characters reacting to the reports of destruction from Bloodworm Hive. While Sundew would have once rejoiced in the damage to the hive, she is now aware of the damage that the Poison Wings' tactics are doing to Silkwings, who are also victims in this, despite the Poison Wings' frustrations that they won't rise up and fight back. Sundew is torn over the tactics of the revolution and sneaks away to visit her sapwing girlfriend Willow, who is trying to find a cure for Wasp's venom. The big reveal of this book, as in canon, is that the Leafwings are basically responsible for Wasp's venom in the first place by attempting to bring her under their control using the Breath of Evil plant. As much as I enjoyed the reveal of the Othermind and how absolutely cosmically terrifying that was in canon, I am excluding it in this rewrite because I did not like how that resolved and don't really see a way forward with that plot point. And I think keeping Wasp firmly as the arc villain helps unify the plots and keep the theming focused on methods of revolution and rebellion. Of course, Sundew is distraught to learn that her tribe caused this whole mess because they wanted to do to Wasp what she has done to the Hive Wings, and tries to use her leaf speak to accelerate the creation of a cure. But there is none. And the Breath of Evil, while not sentient in this version, does desire to spread to all dragons. The only way to stop Wasp is to kill her and destroy the Breath of Evil forever, especially since all of Wasp's prisoners, including Silkwings and a few Poison Wings that didn't escape from Bloodward Hive in time, have been converted, and the Chrysalis's hideouts revealed. In a large battle, most of the Chrysalis, including Blue, Swordtail, and Scarab, are injected with Wasp's venom via poison darts and brought under her control. In the epilogue, Tsunami and Turtle arrive in Pantala and meet Willow and Cricket. Turtle uses his magic to create a portal on the Pantalan shore, connecting Pantala and Pyria and allowing the Pyria dragons to come over and offer their aid to the Chrysalis, Luna returning to find that things are way more dire than she left them. Book 4 of this arc introduces us to our Gen 2 Pyria dragons as they meet Luna and form plans to help Pantala, similar to the Dangerous Gift, but without a ton of focus on Snowfall. The perspective character for this book is Firefly, and now let me introduce you to my semi-canon OC. Firefly is very similar to Glory when she was younger, very sassy and sarcastic, but with more confidence. She can spit venom, shift her scales with darker colors, and vanish completely in shadows. Moonlight empowers her as well as sunlight. She's currently attending Jade Academy with Current, Princess Onyx, Truthseeker, Lava, and Cliff. There are enough students in attendance from different tribes and hybrid dragons that they've stopped assigning wings based on including one dragon from each tribe, though they do still try to diversify as much as possible. Anyway, the queens assemble at Jade Mountain, which is now generally a safe gathering place for intertribal communications and diplomacy, in addition to a school, and they decide who's going to help Pantala, how they're going to get there, etc. There's a lot of time spent with the newer characters understanding their dynamic, and that they are definitely going to go to Pantala, whether their parents say they can or not. Ultimately, it's decided that Turtle and Anemone will create a portal, since the whole group trying to make the flight is just going to take way too long. Anemone sets up one portal on the coast of the Sea Kingdom, and Turtle and Tsunami swim out to where Luna was found and go from there until they find Pantala, and Turtle can enchant the matching portal to Anemone's. Luna, Firefly, Lava, Cliff, and Current arrive on Pantala and get caught up on what's happening. Realizing they have a serious problem on their hands, they are then ambushed by Wasp's forces, who use the portal to go to Pyria. Turtle closes off the portal as fast as he can and dives, definitely not wanting Wasp to have an Animus dragon under her control. Tsunami is hit protecting him, and the rest of the free dragons fly for their lives. The last book, Flames of Hope, features the first split perspective in the series between Luna in Pantala and Onyx in Pyria, and is just action scene after action scene. Luna, Sundew, Willow, Firefly, Lava, Cliff, and Current are trying to find the source of the breath of evil to destroy it in the hopes that it will also disrupt Queen Wasp's abilities. Queen Wasp, now in Pyria, threatens every tribe there with her rapidly spreading army, with Princess Onyx and Truthseeker working with the queens and the Dragonets of Destiny to fight back. I'm not entirely sure what all the plot beats would be, but I do think that Thorn would be killed and Onyx would receive her namesake, the Eye of Onyx, and use the legendary Wings of Fire to kill Wasp with the help of the previous protagonists from the past 2 arcs. Jewel would become Queen of the Hive Wings and work with Queen Sequoia, Queen Belladonna, and newly elected Queen Io to restore Pantala. In terms of themes, I've of course brought up the discourse around various means of protesting injustice a few times in this plot summary. Protest, strike, rebellion, revolt, riot, each has their place, and the young dragons in this arc are figuring out when and where each is appropriate. If I was writing these books for real, I would probably spend a good part of the Lost Continent discussing how Flame Silks have tried striking for better conditions, protests, and the like, before the later books start dealing more with outright rebellion and the uprising of the oppressed. In previous arcs, we've had characters who were raised among those who are different, and characters raised among those who are from their own groups, and how their upbringing has affected their view of others. The Lost Continent arc would add in the dimension of direct oppression to this dynamic in having Cricket interacting with Blue, Luna, and Sundew, and in Firefly reconciling her Nightwing and Rainwing heritage. This set of books alone would require so many sensitivity readers to appropriately convey these themes and interactions, but I think it would be worth it. So that's what I would do with this story. Is it better? Worse? That depends on the reader, but I like it. And now I turn this discussion over to you. What were your favorite or least favorite parts of the Wings of Fire books? If you were to rewrite the series, what would you add, remove, or change? I'm actually pretty eager to see your comments and ideas. And if you've made it this far into the video, make sure to leave me a fire emoji and tell me all about your opinions. I cannot wait to see what you guys come up with. Thank you so much for watching, and a special thank you to my patrons. If you'd like to see your name here or in the description below, please consider joining my Patreon. Your support means so much to me and allows me to continue making content. If you want to support my content in different ways, consider buying my books, donating on Ko-fi, subscribing to the channel, or even just giving this video a like and comment. Any and everything is appreciated so much. Keep growing till next time, Rose Garden!